Who is King Imu? What is their devil-fruit power? How did they become king of the world? Is Imu one of the ancient weapons? And what is their true identity really? So many mysteries surround what is potentially the most enigmatic figure in all of One Piece, who is such a vital piece to the grander mysteries of the series that if we could only find out who they really are, then maybe, just maybe, we might even be able to understand what the One Piece treasure itself is. But to get to that point, we're going to have to solve every single mystery surrounding King Imu, so let's get to the bottom of the Void Century in the biggest Imu theory ever told. To understand the truth of the Void Century and the One Piece treasure itself, we really need to better understand who Imu really is. So let's start with the basics and outline what we know for a fact. As Ivankov inferred, Imu is almost certainly one of the original 20 founding members of the world government, a king from a certain country once ruled by the Nerona family. This Saint Nerona led the other 19 kings in defeating the people of the ancient kingdom, and used the Ope Ope no Mi to attain perennial youth and take control of the world. However, Ivankov also likely speculated that Imu was connected to one of the ancient weapons, as Imu's power to wipe out an entire island in one attack is the exact same description that Crocodile attributed to one of the other ancient weapons, since we've been told that only they can possess such world-destroying power. But how could Imu be an ancient weapon? Well, once you think about it, suddenly a very clear pattern begins to emerge. If what destroyed Lelouch was a flying weapon, then it basically would have to have been a flying saucer, a UFO, or more simply, a flying ship. To clarify, while it was said that Vegapunk created the Mother Flame, the way it's been referred to in the Japanese version seems to indicate the idea that the Mother Flame is the power source behind the weapon rather than the weapon itself. It's likely that the actual weapon is a flying ship, as we mentioned, that likely existed since the Void Century, while the Mother Flame is the energy source that powers it, meaning that Imu likely had possession of the weapon but needed Vegapunk's energy cells to power it. As Ivankov explained, this was most likely an ancient weapon connected to Imu, which would be the flying ship that we mentioned, the dark object that Sabo and the others saw flying in the sky. But when you think about it, it's not the only weapon that is a ship, as Pluton was also said to be a battleship hidden underneath Wano. But wait, the other ancient weapon, Poseidon, also involves a giant ship, the Ark Noah. So what if all three weapons are actually giant ships, all meant to fulfill the same grand purpose? But wait, hold on, Artur, you might say. Isn't Shirahoshi considered to be the ancient weapon Poseidon? Well, yes, but we may be looking at this at the wrong way. Maybe it's not that all the ancient weapons are people or all the ancient weapons are ships. What if each ancient weapon isn't a singular entity, but rather is formed by three different components: a colossal ship, a person who can put it to use, and the giant creatures that said person can control. Think about it. For example, with Poseidon we have Shirahoshi, who has the power to command the Sea Kings through the voice of all things. Those Sea Kings are then the only things that can move the colossal Ark Noah, fulfilling their purpose. Similarly, Pluton is a battleship that is hidden beneath Wano, but the only way to unleash this weapon is by quite literally physically opening the borders of the Wano country, which we have been told can only be achieved by Zunisha. Zunisha came to Wano to open its borders upon Joyboy's return, but Momonosuke told it to wait until they were better prepared to face the government. Since Momonosuke is the only person that can command Zunisha, doing it also through the voice of all things just like Shirahoshi, it would make Momonosuke the champion of Pluton, and Zunisha, the beast he commands, being the only creature that can unleash the battleship Pluton upon the world. Even Yamato had told Momonosuke that according to Oden's journal, after he found out about the truth of the ancient weapons, he realized that Momonosuke was essential to fulfilling the purpose of the weapons, that of bringing the dawn of the world, for which he had to survive at all costs. Something that can only mean that Momonosuke is one of the three ancient weapons, being the human counterpart of Pluton, who can command Zunisha just like Shirahoshi, and is the only one that can unleash the battleship Pluton upon the world. So finally, perhaps Imu is the champion who, through commanding some giant large creature, can unleash the starship Uranus upon the world. But if that is the case, what is the giant creature that Imu could command? while Pluton, Poseidon, and Uranus are all named after gods, specifically the trinity of gods from Greco-Roman mythology that rule over the three planes: the underworld, the sea, and the skies. This is reflected in the three ancient weapons, as Pluton is hidden in the underworld of Wano, Poseidon is hidden in the seas, and Imu is located in the skies atop the red line. And similarly, elephants are land creatures, sea kings are water creatures, so what are giant creatures that fly through the skies? Dragons are sacred to the world government. After all, their very gods are literally called the celestial dragons. Though if we translate from Japanese more literally, the kanji used for celestial dragons is actually the same used for the planet Uranus in Japanese. And this is no coincidence, as the Sea Kings also used the exact same kanji used for the Japanese name for the planet Poseidon. It was even mentioned that the celestial dragons had ordered Vegapunk to artificially recreate dragons, the ones we saw in Punk Hazard, and likely were also those who requested they replicate Kaida's fruit, which was eventually eaten by Momonosuke, likely due to their adoration of the dragons Imu once controlled, which is why Imu blessed 19 champions with the title of Celestial Dragons, or literally Uranus Dragons even if you want to be more literal. Dragons are currently considered mythological creatures as they have all gone extinct, but we can prove their historical existence through a famous dragon of legend, the one from the tale of the samurai Ryuma. According to legend, during a time when the recently founded government tried to seize control of the Wano country, a dragon was sent to take the land. This was likely right after the end of the Void Century, as with the giant barriers erected around the country, it would have been impossible to enter the country via any means but the skies. So it would make sense that Imu sent the dragon to invade from above, but as the story tells, Ryuma stood guard to protect his homeland from the invaders, and in a legendary duel, Ryuma slayed the dragon over the capital of Wano, proving to the government that their country would remain free. Thus, this dragon vanished from the Void Century and became myth, but every myth becomes a mythological fruit, and thus that took the form of the Uonomi Model Seiryu, which the Celestial Dragons then kept safe. That would be until Kaido ate the fruit when Big Mom raided it from the island in the God Valley incident, and in an ironic twist of fate, Kaido will return to retake the Wano country, just as Imu tried to so many years before. This would perfectly explain everything, except there's one thing that doesn't add up. As we were told, the ancient weapons were meant to be used by the ancient kingdom to help bring good to the world. And this makes sense, as after all, the Mother Flame would have been impossible to build without the advanced technology of the kingdom. As Rocinante once explained to us, the D-Clan are considered the natural enemies of the gods, the Celestial Dragons, something that Imu later confirmed, stating that the D-Clan were the people of the ancient kingdom who opposed the 20 kings of the Void Century. And as Rocinante elaborated, the purpose of the D-Clan, the people of the ancient kingdom, is to bring the destruction of the world, but as he clarified, not a destruction meant in a negative sense like someone like Doflamingo or Imu would intend it, but a destruction that could bring good to the world. And we've constantly been told across the series that the ancient weapons will bring destruction to the world, which likely refers to the destruction of the Red Line and the Grand Line for the sake of uniting the entire world as one sea, literally one piece, the All Blue. This is the purpose that the three ships of the ancient weapons serve. Pluton and Uranus, capable of destroying islands in one blast, could be the only thing capable of blowing up the Red Line. Its destruction would cause the collapse of Fishman Island below it, fulfilling the prophecy of Luffy destroying the island that Charlie foresaw, but to aid that, Poseidon's Ark will help the people of Fishman Island emigrate to the surface where they can coexist with humans, which is the promise that was made with the people of Fishman Island so long ago. So here's the thing that doesn't add up. Why would Imu, one of the 20 kings that opposed the ancient kingdom, be the champion of one of the ancient weapons of the kingdom that were meant to change the world for good? Well, the answer is fairly simple. It must mean that Imu was originally part of this ancient kingdom, but eventually betrayed them. And the key to all this lies specifically in the names of the three ancient weapons, as not only are Pluton, Poseidon, and Uranus the name of three ancient gods, but also the names of the final three planets of our celestial system. And what are the names of the other planets? Mercury, Venus, Mars, Saturn, and Jupiter. The names of the Gorosei, or when translated from Japanese, literally the 5 elder planets. The 5 elder planets are the only planets of our solar system that were observable prior to the invention of modern telescopes, but during that time it was believed that planets revolved around the Earth. The likes of Galileo Galilei tried disproving this by demonstrating that the Earth revolved around the Sun alongside the other planets, but as the Earth, being the center of the universe, served a sense of importance to monarchs and the Church, such belief was kept as law for many centuries. Thus, this model of planets revolving around the Earth, known as geocentrism, has become a symbol for propaganda and false history, whereas instead all planets revolving around the Sun alongside the other planets is a symbol for the scientific truth. So in this case, the Sun would obviously be the figure of the sun god Nika, and by comparison, in this scheme, the figure of the Earth may be Imu themselves, with the 5 elder planets all orbiting around them, and the ancient weapons removed from this scheme. And if we follow the Greco-Roman gods after which the Gorosei are named after, the god for the Earth would be Gaia, the mother of nature, which has an equivalent in the One Piece world, being the mother of nature, Umi, the embodiment of the sea, stated to be the one that punished Delphrid users to drown in water, which suddenly would make a lot of sense as it would explain why Imu is just Umi backwards, or even why their residence is called Marie-Joie, as that translates to Lady of the Sea. Even the term Pangea, or as it is more correctly pronounced, Pangaea, is derived from Gaia, the goddess that is Mother Nature herself in Greek mythology and embodies the earth. But Delphrid users drowning in water is an inherent nature built within the Delphrids themselves, an actual flaw of the genetic code they provide, meaning that only the one who created the Delphrids could be the one that could force their users to drown in water. Which all adds up, as just like Shanks explained in chapter 19, the myth of the origin of Delphrids is that they are the so-called incarnations of a legendary being known as the Sea Devil, or Umi no Akuma in Japanese, literally the sea itself. But why would the creator of Delphrids hate their users and punish them by drowning in water? Well, there are several ways you could explain it, but the simplest answer is that this was the intention all along. After all, if Umi is literally the sea, then that means that Delphrid users cannot oppose their power. So what if Imu purposely offered the Delphrids to the people of the Ancient Kingdom, only to cripple them to their powers and making Imu undefeatable to them? And think about it, this would make perfect sense, because regardless of if they may have been artificially created or not, fruits would need a tree to grow from, and what other tree could be better than the Sun Tree Eve? Before Marie-Joie, upon the top of the Red Line, was the settlement of the Lunaria known as the God Country, one of the biggest members of the Ancient Kingdom. The Lunaria brought the incredible technology from the moon to this country, which included the research into the bloodline elements, achieving genetic alterations which likely explain how the Lunaria became much more genetically enhanced than the other angel tribes, a technology that Imu may have suggested putting to use alongside the power of the Sun Tree Eve to generate the original Devil fruits, tricking the people of the God Country into making their dreams come true, only to secretly cripple them. Imu doesn't even need to have been a Lunaria, even just one of the many allies of the kingdom would have been enough, given the many allies it had. This likely earned them Imu's trust, leading to making them one of the champions of the 3 ancient weapons, which Imu took advantage to instead betray and backstab this kingdom. In fact, it was likely Imu who secretly gathered the other 19 kings in the first place to declare war on the God Country, and just put this grand plan into action by usurping power from them. In the current world of One Piece, we know that Imu's subordinates, the Celestial Dragons, are gods, while those that associate with the Void Century and its kingdom are branded as devils, like the Devils of Ohara or the Devil Child Robin. But during the Void Century, the roles were actually reversed. The people of the God Country were known as gods, whereas instead the rulers of the 20 kingdoms were described by some as literally word by word the devils, and it would thus make sense that above them all would be the Sea Devil, from whom originated fruits that people began to call the fruits of the devil fruits, as it was the king of the devils who created them, thus earning their name. Even Sabo directly referred to the empty throne as the real location of hell in the One Piece world, as witnessing the devilish form of King Imu and all the devil-like transformations of the Gorosei, it was evident to him that all of them were nothing more than devils. It is after all this group that then took over the God Country and instead built Marie-Joie in its place. In fact, this entire scenario fits really well as it perfectly mimics the story of the Book of Genesis. Even the devil fruit book in the story was revealed to be called the Book of Genesis, making a clear reference to the tale. As you may likely know, Genesis tells the story of Adam and Eve, who lived in the country of God, the Garden of Eden, where they enjoyed an utopian life. However, they were tempted by the devil to bite into the fruits of the forbidden tree, and as Eve bit into them, they were thus betrayed and exiled from the land of God. Some variations of the tale also had that Lilith, who came before Eve, attempted to disobey the orders of Adam, for which he was branded a demon and exiled. All of this fits really well with the story of the Void Century. The devil Imu tempted and tricked the people of the God Country with the fruits from the devil fruit tree Eve, resulting in them losing their godly status and being expelled from the country. The figure of Nefertari Lily, being the stand-in for Lilith, attempted to stand against Imu but was branded a demon alongside the other people of the God Country and banished in turn. And so with this great elaborate gambit, Imu seized control of the God Country and attained perennial youth to rule the world forevermore. There is also an additional idea I have on top of this, which could maybe make sense or not, but I think it's worth bringing up at least. Originally there was a lot of talk about the possibility of Imu being in reality Nefertari Lily, which was shot down very quickly. But what if this actually could still be the case? What if Imu and Lily weren't the same person, but Imu ended up becoming Lily? A lot of people don't know this fact, but when Doflamingo first talked about the national treasure of Marijua in the Japanese version, he made it very clear that the treasure is actually referring to Imu's very existence directly, with Imu being the living national treasure of Marijua. Doflamingo explained how Imu's very existence could shake the world at its core, something that they did end up very literally doing, but that its existence is the biggest secret the government has. This is why Doflamingo mentioned that they tried persecuting and executing him, but Doflamingo was able to use that to his advantage by blackmailing the government that he would release that information into the world through his underworld connections, which is how he was able to manipulate and blackmail CP0 in his favor during the Dressrosa arc. And furthermore, Doflamingo elaborated that if he had attained the Ope Ope no Mi, then he would have been able to use its power of the personality switching operation, you know, that gag from Punk Hazard about switching bodies, on the national treasure itself to literally become the power that truly rules the world. In other words, Doflamingo wanted to use the personality switching operation to change bodies with Imu directly and become the king of the world, with no one else none the wiser if he would have been able to pull it off. So what I'm getting at is that since Doflamingo brought up both the personality switching operation and the perennial youth operation in the context of Imu, and we have confirmation that Imu used the latter to remain alive all these years, then what if the same is true for the former? What if Imu actually used the personality switching operation on Lily's body, thus becoming Lily directly? It would explain the more slender female silhouette Imu has and why Lily's body literally vanished at Marijua and a bunch of other things. Maybe Lily may even have been the original user of Uranus and that's why Imu took over her body, or perhaps there is some other reason behind it. But regardless whether that's the case or not, it doesn't really matter, because what really matters to us is not if Imu is Lily or what happened to her. What matters is that Imu decided to become king of the world through attaining perennial youth, and to rule the world from the shadows to give people the illusion that they weren't controlled. But because of this, the existence of Imu in the Void Century became myth, and every myth is born upon this world in the form of a mythological devil fruit. So what if, similarly to how someone incarnated Joy Boy during the Void Century, and Imu incarnated the Sea Devil as well, what if, paradoxically, Imu's very existence became a myth again after disappearing from the world that became its own separate devil fruit? But then, who could be the user of this fruit? Which individual is the literal embodiment of everything that Imu stands for? Have you never thought about how weird Blackbeard's fruit is? It's supposedly a Logia, yet somehow Teach said that it doesn't let him turn into the element or dodge any attack like Logia users. Is that because it has special properties, or much more simply because it isn't a Logia? After all, Blackbeard said that the fruit chose him, much in the same way that the Nika fruit may have chosen Luffy after believing his dream, which it could have only done so if it was a Zoan fruit with a will of its own. This may also be why Blackbeard spoke of people's dreams never ending, because the devil is literally the source of all of people's dreams, the fruits. Devil fruits were even described as having a sense of a gravitational force to them, which makes sense if Imu is meant to be the Earth in this geocentric model, wanting everything to revolve around them. And what did Blackbeard describe his darkness as? A gravitational force, one that draws the entities within devil fruit users back to their origin. Even thematically, this makes sense, as Blackbeard has a lot of associations to the devil, like the 3 skulls in his flag being the symbol for the devil in the One Piece world, or the fact that even the real-life Blackbeard that Oda really admires was described by many to be the son of the devil incarnate. Though I don't think the government has changed the name of many fruits aside the Nika fruit, if a fruit that represented Imu's identity existed, then of course it makes sense that much like Nika, the world government would do everything to hide its name, disguising it as the Logia Yami Yami no Mi. And I mean, why else would Blackbeard literally be able to generate water through an attack he calls Kurouzu, literally black water vortex, which negates the abilities of devil fruit users, because he's the mythical incarnation of Imu, the devil that is able to subdue any devil fruit user with its power of the sea. In fact, even Imu seemed to generate arrows that were made of a dark liquid, as indicated by the droplets it left, or in other words, black water. These two forces are like two sides of the same coin, and now Luffy and Blackbeard, the chosen ones of these fruits, will once more be clashing for the future of the world, though none the wiser, the real Umi still lurks in this world under the form of Imu. But beyond the gravitational power and everything else, what is it that Blackbeard described his fruit as? Pure darkness. And as we've seen, Imu appears to embody the concept of darkness as well, taking the form of a dark blob that shifts forms and envelops everything in its darkness. After all, the name Nerona can literally translate to made of darkness, pitch black, and thinking about it, it makes perfect sense, as it further develops the idea that Luffy and Blackbeard, and by extent Joy Boy and Imu, are complete polar opposites. Nika represents pure white, the light of the sun that brings the warmth of the dawn, whereas Imu represents the color black, a cosmic darkness that swallows everything like a black hole. White and black, light and darkness, yin and yang, something that even fits as in Eastern belief. It is believed the 5 elder planets, the Gorosei, revolve around the yin and yang, the black and white. And since we've seen Imu transform into goofy yet frightening figures as well, what if its parallelisms to Joy Boy are even more similar than we think? Perhaps Imu really is the devil, but not so much in a Lovecraftian form, but more like the devil out of a cartoon, with a devil's tail and encompassing the very primal nightmares of all humans. The same principle as the cartoonish figure that is Joy Boy, but in a much more twisted form. As it was said, Joy Boy is fundamentally the dreams and hopes of people incarnate, bringing laughs to people's faces by acting goofy, whereas Imu is the fears and nightmares of people incarnate, controlling everyone from the shadows. And it is this dynamic of the duality between these two forces of light and darkness that is the key to finally properly understanding what Joy Boy's treasure, the One Piece, actually is.